Today, I'm going to explain how you can prepare your track for streaming services by using MasterCheck as part of your workflow. If you aren't already familiar with MasterCheck, then I recommend watching an introduction to MasterCheck first. Today's video will cover some of the same content, but I will also go into more detail about some real-world applications. It's one thing for a track to sound great on a pair of studio monitors, but for many of us, it's also important to sound great on Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and other streaming services. After all, that's where people are likely to hear your track for the first time. So let's say we've already got things sounding perfect on those monitors. What next? First of all, we can check what kind of effect the encoding process will have across various streaming platforms. Something like Spotify Mobile or YouTube Low Bitrate will likely introduce the most noticeable artifacts. When first selecting these options, you won't hear any difference to start with, but you will be able to see how the true peak meters give different measurements depending on the codec. Just because a track doesn't clip on the master bus in your session doesn't necessarily mean it won't clip after encoding. This really highlights the importance of using a true peak limiter like NewGen's ISL at the end of your chain. In order to hear the effect of a codec, you need to activate Monitor and then select the desired platform via the circular buttons on the right. You might notice certain frequencies seem quieter or less defined, or you might notice some slight distortion. You can confirm this with the delta function, which allows you to hear only the missing audio information. If you don't trust your ears yet, or if you do trust your ears but you want a second opinion, a tool like NewGen's Visualizer can help to identify the areas where this is having the most significant impact. You might decide to tweak your EQ in order to compensate and regain some clarity. It's also worth considering that these codecs tend to have a less damaging effect on less heavily compressed tracks, so you could try backing off some of the limiting and compression and listen to how each codec responds. Remember that most streaming services apply some form of loudness normalization, so a super loud master is often not the best way to make your track stand out. As well as listening to the codecs, we can also check out how loudness normalization will affect a track. As your track plays through, MasterCheck takes an integrated loudness measurement. Don't forget that loudness is measured over time, so this is an average of the entire track. MasterCheck doesn't have the same history function as a more advanced loudness meter like VisLM, but this measurement should get you in the right ballpark. You can use the offset to match function to hear the effects of loudness normalization on each platform. Before even thinking about the numerical measurements, it's worth just flipping back and forth, listening to the changes. Ignoring the encoding process, the loudness normalization on these platforms is generally just a linear gain adjustment. On some level, you can just trust the listener to turn their own volume up or down if necessary. So if the master sounds good to you after normalization, then you don't necessarily need to consider any further processing to compensate. If you do feel like the loudness normalization is making a big difference, then it's worth noting that most of the major platforms normalize audio somewhere between -13 and -16 LUFS. So you could argue that there's no point mastering louder than this. If you master to -10 LUFS, for example, Spotify will simply turn your track down by 4 LU, and you'll lose 4 dB of headroom, resulting in a less dynamic master. The biggest exception to this is SoundCloud, which doesn't apply any loudness normalization. In many ways, the loudness war is still ongoing on SoundCloud, so you could upload a super loud master and still sound louder than everyone else. This is a personal choice at the end of the day, but it's worth weighing up against the disadvantages of losing dynamics on Spotify, YouTube and Apple Music, as well as the extra codec artifacts you're likely to encounter with a loud master. Unlike a TV mix engineer, you aren't obligated or even expected to submit audio which conforms to these loudness standards. The streaming platforms will normalize whatever you send them. So that's a slightly more detailed look at how to prepare your tracks for streaming services. As always, you can find a free trial of MasterCheck on the NewGen Audio website, along with free trials of the other plugins mentioned, that's ISL and Visualizer. Thanks for watching.